All right, good morning, good morning. It's a mellow Monday. We're not quite up to doing the outside videos yet, but y'all, things are looking up. I'm feeling better. And this morning, mellow Monday, but we're going to talk about some news this morning. Got some SCOTUS stuff to talk about. Hope you got your cup of coffee. I see Fish and Golf in there with First Blood. Good morning, brother. Good to see you. Let's do a show. Good morning. All right. So, like I said, it is a mellow Monday morning. Let me bring that microphone in close where it's supposed to be. Hello. All right. I see here to lurk, and Cindy's with us this morning. Good morning, Cindy. All right. So, mellow Monday. Hope you got your cup of coffee. Good morning. Hope y'all had a great weekend. But you know who did not have a great weekend? Joe Biden, because wow, he absolutely just shit the bed on that debate last week and spent the weekend having everybody call for him to basically drop out. Hold on just a second. I apologize. Live is hard mode. I gotta adjust this seat again. There we go. All right. So, but what I want to talk about this morning is related to the upcoming election, sort of. There have been a few very important SCOTUS decisions recently. Two of them were last week, and both of them are things that I've been following closely for a long time now, especially the Chevron case. But first, because I want to spend a little more time on Chevron, let's start with the Supreme Court on January 6th. So, this is a very interesting case for several reasons, not least of which I hope to see this referred to and cited in a lot of situations. Okay? So the Supreme Court on Friday ruled in favor of a participant in the January 6th, that language there, Capitol riot. Let me say this real quick. This is the Fox News take on this, and they're using the expression Capitol riot. Now, I'll give them a little bit of credit that they didn't say insurrection. But even Capitol riot is misleading. It's an ungenerous characterization of what happened, because that's a whole rabbit hole to go down, and yeah. So we're not going to go down. We're not going to go all the way deep down that rabbit hole. But the obstruction charge. Obstruction is a bullshit charge. Let me dig in on that for a minute. I want y'all to think back to the Russia hoax and the Mueller investigation, the Mueller report, right? Remember, it's Mueller time. Mueller's going to come out and show us all the evidence and prove that Donald Trump is, God, they went so far as to say that he's been a Russian asset for so long that he's actually like a USSR KGB, a Soviet Union KGB asset. And a lot of us are sitting here thinking, all this gray beard, what comes with this? Right. Okay. I'm not as old as I look. This is 4 kids in a desert war, right? But But I'm old enough to remember when we took down the wall, when the Soviet Union ceased to exist. Just about, it was a little less than 40 years ago, right? A little less than 40 years ago, mid 80s, late 80s. And one day, all of a sudden, your tax dollars had to buy a bunch of new maps because there was no more Soviet fucking Union. Donald Trump was not a Soviet Union KGB spy in 2016, but they sure as hell did want you to think he was. Well, if you'll recall, in the Mueller report, there were accusations of that Trump had obstructed. And of course, the question that we all asked was, he obstructed what? We obstructed the investigation. The investigation into what? Well, the investigation. Yes, but what were you investigating? You see, because if there's no underlying crime, it is not possible for there to be an investigation to obstruct, right? Oh, and that is an important, it's a semantic difference. It seems like a pedantic and nitpicky argument, but this is important, right? You'll see First Amendment auditors all the time. And guys, I love the First Amendment auditors. I do. But a lot of them are just assholes trying to start a problem, right? And sometimes they lose. And those videos are funny too. Of course, those are hard to find because, you know, who's posting their L's, right? But often what you'll see in those auditor videos is the officer will finally just get fed up with the whole thing and arrest the auditor for obstruction. And here's why. If you're filming in public, you're not breaking the law. You are indeed engaged in a constitutionally protected activity. Now, it may be the case that you're filming somewhere where you're not just being obnoxious, or it's not just the case that what you're doing is obnoxious, but you're doing it there intentionally to be obnoxious, intentionally to get some cops to come out and cause a problem so that you can catch cops behaving badly, post it on the internet, make some money off of views. Well, there's a couple things to understand about when that happens. And I promise this all does relate to the January 6th thing because we're talking about obstruction. And I want you to understand the use of obstruction by law enforcement. So the officer comes out and, hey, let me get your ID. No. And they like to start to jump up and down on, oh, well, I'm gonna arrest you. I'm gonna throw your ass in jail for refusing to identify. Because cops, you know, guys, I do not have an especially high opinion of law enforcement. I know many of you already know that, and it comes down to this, right? We get lumped together a lot, right? Veterans and law enforcement. Hey, these are heroes that swore an oath and put their lives on the line for their country. No. Some of us raised our hand and went and found people who have killed Americans, people who hurt children, people who traffic drugs and sex slaves, and we found them where they live and put them in the dirt forever. And then you've got the guys who raised their hand and swore an oath. And then they spend their days collecting revenue at gunpoint from law-abiding citizens who went 5 miles over the speed limit. They go and they maintain a less than 50% solve rate on homicides and most other crime generally. and the majority of their job is just harassing otherwise law-abiding citizens and protecting criminals from guys like me by making it difficult legally for me to just pick up a rifle and go solve your fucking fentanyl crisis. We are not the same. Some of us solve bad guys. Right? Those of us that wore a flag solved monsters. Your badge just aggravates citizens. So I do not like them pretending that they're anything other than fucking revenue collectors. And I'm sorry. Well, I apologize. This is a less mellow morning than I like to have on a Monday, but the obstruction thing is important. So they'll get there and they'll go after they want that ID cookie and they'll go after it. Well, I've got a Fourth Amendment, right? Fourth Amendment, it's very clear that I am secure in my person, properties, and papers. That includes my government-issued ID card. That is my document. You have no right to it. You can ask, but you cannot compel me without reasonable, articulable suspicion of a specific crime. Right? You can't just say you're suspicious or somebody called about you. Yeah, anybody could call about me. I could call about anybody. Matter of fact, what's to stop me from picking up my phone right now, calling 911 and saying, hey, there's a guy here dressed like a police officer and he's giving me unlawful orders with a gun. I think he's impersonating a law enforcement officer because he clearly doesn't understand the law well enough to be a professional LEO and must therefore be impersonating an officer. I need help and I need it now. And if you've got an officer who is making unlawful, unconstitutional demands, then what you're looking at is an armed criminal committing crime, right? They'll refer sometimes to it when, if an officer without correct justification puts handcuffs on you and throws you in the back of the car, they'll refer to that as a false arrest, a bad arrest, or even an unlawful arrest. Bullshit. There is a word for that. That is a very specific crime. It's called kidnapping. And it's a federal crime, right? This is also important to understand. Anytime a police officer unlawfully puts handcuffs on you and arrests you, that is not a crime which falls within the jurisdiction of that officer or that officer's department or even your state Bureau of Investigations. A false arrest by a police officer is the exclusive province, and there are only two crimes that rise to this: kidnapping and arson. That's automatic federal involvement. FBI comes in, and that officer needs to be charged with the federal crime of kidnapping because that is what he has done. Okay, that's a tangent. Back to obstruction. They like to hit you with obstruction. It's a catch-all. They start asking questions. Well, sir, I'm just conducting my investigation. Okay, conduct your investigation. Unless you have a particular crime. And now, in all fairness, they do not have to tell you what the specific crime is. But if they force you to give up that ID, you file the complaint, you file the lawsuit, and if they cannot prove that there at the time existed sufficient evidence that a reasonable person could have correctly articulated the suspicion of a crime, then they will have committed the crime under Section 242 of violating your civil liberties of violating your Fourth Amendment right. And that is important to press, because here's the thing about your individual liberties: they cannot be unviolated. If at any point a government official ever violates your individual civil liberties, one of the baseline principles of the law is that justice involves making the victim whole, right? Carry car insurance. You're in a bad car accident, and it's actually an accident, right? Just a bad confluence of events. Neither party's really at fault, but somebody gets assigned blame, and everybody has had damage done to their vehicles. Well, one of you is more at fault than the other, and the remedy is to make everybody whole. Is for the person who caused the damage to reverse the damage, right? And in a perfect world, that takes everything into account. Like, you know, I'm on my way to work, and you rear-ended me. It's your fault. My car is broken, and I'm missing a day of work. So you need to pay me to fix my car and for the wages that I lost because you cost me a day of work. I'm being made whole. If the government locks you in a cage for a period of time, and then it is discovered or proved that your being in that cage was unjust and therefore unlawful, you cannot be made whole. There is no fixing that. And keep that in mind, that idea of being made whole. Because we got two cases in particular that I'm going to mention in relation to this obstruction situation. But the underlying crime, back to the Mueller report, they kept saying he obstructed. He obstructed what? There is no underlying crime. And this is where that pedantic distinction that I said, and this is an important distinction. It is not merely pedantic, okay? It is not the case that without the underlying crime, it is unreasonable to charge obstruction because there's nothing to obstruct insofar as the person can't have a particular crime to argue against. If there is not an underlying crime, legally, there cannot be an investigation. And if there cannot be an investigation, it is metaphysically impossible for there to be an obstruction. If there's not a specific crime that law enforcement is investigating, they can do what they refer to as conducting an investigation. But without a target, without an objective, without evidence to support that something happened, see, you can't conduct an investigation without evidence. If you don't have evidence, then you do not even have a suspicion. If you say that you have a suspicion, but there's not evidence to support the suspicion, and I mean evidence, let's be clear, that evidence is pretty broad category, right? That can be, well, you know, Nick the Nose was found dead. Okay, so something happened. And there's no evidence at all that Big Jim killed Nick the Nose, except one cop doesn't like the way that one of Big Jim's hookers said she was with him that night, and that's his alibi. And that's slim. but it's evidence. Mueller's report said there was no evidence that anything happened, but that Trump should be charged for obstruction because he was uncooperative on certain documents, because he would not produce certain documents. And of course, the finding that there was no evidence essentially proved that there were no documents, that the documents in question did not exist, because they were making reference to documents which theoretically, if they existed, would refer to an event for which there was no evidence that the event had ever occurred. And that pedantic difference, it is not that it's unreasonable and unlawful to charge obstruction without an underlying crime. It is that it is metaphysically impossible to obstruct an investigation which cannot legally exist because the evidence that the crime even occurred. Right, and remember, what we're talking about, it's not just that there's no evidence that the alleged crime never occurred. Right? If there's an alleged crime, if there's some reason to allege the crime, that speaks to the existence of a piece of evidence. But what we're talking about, the use of the charge of obstruction, and this is what they did to the January 6th guys, is because they had no crime to charge them with, they instead charged them with generic obstruction. Right? This is one, you're home, you've been drinking, but you're at home. The cops show up for no apparent reason. I'm going to try to be vague with these details because this is based on a true story that happened to somebody else. And there's no evidence that you've done anything wrong. It's just that you're drunk at home and they've already been called out, right? Cops like to say you can beat the charges, but you can't beat the ride. And that's absolutely true. And every officer who ever, if you beat the charges, in my opinion, if you beat the charges, that should be the end of a police officer's career. Every time. Every time you beat the charges, a cop should be fired. Because they say you can beat the charge, but you can't beat the ride. Which is to say, I know that I'm crooked and corrupt. I know that I'm charging you with an illegitimate charge. I know that what I'm doing is wrong, but you aggravated me, and I want to get some payback. I want to hurt you because you annoyed me. And so I'm going to put you in handcuffs. I'm going to take you downtown. I'm going to throw you in jail. You're going to spend the night there until somebody comes in that you can argue with in the morning. And then they're going to drop the charges. They're going to let you go, and you're free and clear. But you still had a bad night. I still got to hurt you a little bit. I got to fuck with you because I have a badge and a gun. That's what the charge of obstruction without an underlying crime is all about. It's about giving police officers the authority to cause harm to law-abiding citizens for doing nothing more than insisting on their civil rights being respected by not having their 4th, 5th, right, their 6th or 7th amendments violated. Right? This is what obstruction is all about. So, in the January 6th case, hundreds of people have been charged with only obstruction and incarcerated on that charge. And here's the thing. So now the Supreme Court has made it very clear that no, it was never even legitimate for you to charge obstruction in this case. In fact, they went after a very particular obstruction where, in order to make the argument, the High Court held to a narrow interpretation of the federal statute that imposes criminal liability on anyone who corruptly alters, destroys, mutilates, or conceals a record, document, or other object, or attempts to do so with the intent to impair the object's integrity or availability for use in an official proceeding. Which means that the judges in the January 6th case who went with the obstruction charge are going so far as to claim that the people who walked into the Capitol building, stayed between the velvet ropes, were escorted by police officers. It means that these judges are alleging that those people who we have on camera for the entire duration of their visit to the Capitol acquired documents specifically related to the confirmation of the presidential election of 2020 and physically altered or destroyed or attempted to remove those documents. And of course, there is no evidence to that because it didn't happen. We know it didn't happen because, like I said, those people are on camera for the entire duration of their visit to the Capitol. Obstruction is a charge that only happens when law enforcement or a judge have decided that because they don't like you personally and you haven't done anything wrong, they need some kind of a way to hurt you because they want to hurt you, to remind you that they're the government, they have the monopoly on violence, they have the big gun, and fuck you, you little pleb. We just want to hurt you because that's what government does. It hurts you. It is the only thing government does. It causes harm. It's what it's for. Now, in theory, it has the secondary follow-on objective of causing harm sufficient to use the threat of its ability to cause harm in order to compel socially desirable behavior. But that third order follow-on outcome is insufficient, in my moral opinion, to justify that the entity at its root is an engine of harm. So, now that that's been overturned, that's going to be great news for a lot of January 6thers, except for this. A lot of them have already served time, are currently serving time. Some of them, like Brandon Fellows, is the one who has already served his entire 3-year sentence, was paroled about a month ago. And what did I say? What did I say just a little bit ago? Right? Justice, a big part of the premise of justice legally within our system of law, the English common law system, is the idea that the victim needs to be made whole. Right? That's why in cases of egregious crime, murders, rapes, arson, and incidentally, I'm going to get to this in a little more detail in just a second, violations of Section 242. That's why crimes like that could warrant the death penalty. That's when the world, that's when society looks at you and says, you hurt this person so bad that they cannot be unhurt. You caused so much damage that it is unrepairable. Right? You hit my car and completely total it, and it can't be fixed. You can replace the car. Okay, so the car can't be repaired, but it can be replaced, and now I've been made whole. Right? But you can't unmurder one of my children. You can't unserve a 3-year sentence in prison. Right, so you got Brandon Fellows served his full 3-year sentence already. Now, the best outcome here, the best outcome we can likely expect here, is that Mr. Fellows and several other of these victims of the Biden administration and the January 6th hoax, the best outcome we can hope for is several of these victims will be paid settlements. Right? Because, I mean, he just lost wages for 3 full years and spent 3 full years with his liberty stripped from him, his rights removed from him. Or what about Matthew Perna? He's one of the ones who committed suicide. He's one of the ones that decided to check himself out, to shuffle loose this mortal coil, when he was rather, as we now know, not only unjustly, but illegally incarcerated for a long period. I forget the details on Perna's sentence, but if I remember correctly, he was sentenced to much more than 3 years. But he's dead. He lost all hope and surrendered to the great oblivion. How do you make that whole? Well, interestingly, Section 242, you know what? I should have gone ahead and pulled this up, because I know you guys get tired of hearing me talk about Section 242. Let me read the exact text of Section 242, because it is pretty clear once you get down to the end of it. And this is what I want you to be aware of, because this is what has been done to these men, to these victims by these judges. Wait, what the hell? I had it. No, that's Section 2. Damn it. No. There, 242. Whoever, under color of any law, statute, ordinance, regulation, or custom, willfully subjects any person in any state, territory, commonwealth, possession, or district to the deprivation of any rights, privileges, or immunities secured or protected by the Constitution or laws of the United States, or to different punishments, pains, or penalties on account of such person being an alien or by reason of his color or race, that are prescribed for the punishment of citizens, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 1 year or both. Okay, not more than 1 year or both. Up to this point, what we're talking about is a police officer in uniform asking you for an ID, and then lying and telling you that your refusal to surrender your ID is a violation of the law. A government official. And remember, this is under color of law. So, this could be somebody impersonating a police officer who is pretending that they have the authority to enforce law, or a person who actually is a police officer who actually does have the authority to enforce law, but is unlawfully taking an action while claiming that the action he's taking is lawful, right? So now we're up to fined or imprisoned not more than 1 year or both, right? That's because, and that's for, well, this cop tried to steal my ID. And if bodily injury results, now we're getting into what these judges have done. If bodily injury results from the acts committed in violation of this section, or if such acts include the use, attempted use, or threatened use of a dangerous weapon, explosives, or fire, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 10 years or both. Now you've got every judge in this case, every judge who has sentenced one of these people to time in prison under this illegal obstruction charge. What you have done by sentencing them to time in prison is you have threatened the use of dangerous weapons to force these people to serve a term of incarceration on an illegal charge, on an illegitimate charge. So now we've got that every judge who has ruled, who has found these people guilty, belongs in prison for up to 10 years. And I know I said I wanted to spend more time on Chevron than this. Maybe Chevron's just what we talk about tomorrow. Yeah, I think that's what we're going to have to do. And then we get to this. And if death results from the acts committed in violation of this section, or if such acts include kidnapping or an attempt to kidnap, which, as I detailed earlier, is what is happening when a police officer falsely arrests you or falsely imprisons you. Right? So now that we're up to includes kidnapping or an attempt to kidnap, aggravated sexual abuse or an attempted aggravated sexual abuse, or an attempt to kill, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned for any term of years or for life or both, or may be sentenced to death. And there's my argument. There's the case that I'm making. A false imprisonment is kidnapping and may be sentenced to death. So here's what I'm saying. And I'm going to go ahead and put a pen in it here, and we'll do the Chevron case tomorrow. It is not my personal and considered opinion, but rather the law. Hang the judges. These judges, every one of them that banged that gavel guilty on the obstruction charge, needs to be arrested, prosecuted, convicted, and sentenced to execution, sentenced to die. Because what they have done is, under the guise of the color of law, they have ruined lives. And they have done it not because they believed these people committed crimes. Because if they believed these people committed crimes, then they would have charged these people with crimes. Rather, they have done it because in the absence of crimes with which to charge these people, they've charged them with the illegitimate crime of obstruction without an investigation or a proceeding underlying for which they could have obstructed. Right? It's one thing if a judge gets it wrong, and then you backpedal and you do whatever you can do to make it right. Because that's a judge getting it wrong and one guy having a bad day. And then you do everything you can to make that guy feel better about what happened to him, to help that guy out. You load him up with a pile of money. You make him exempt from taxes in every case for the rest of his life. Whatever you can do. You got one judge, screwed up one time. Okay. Fire the judge. Right? Fire the prosecutor. But in this case, you have a coalition of judges who all somehow got it wrong in such a way that it is unreasonable to believe that it wasn't done intentionally. It is unreasonable to believe that these judges made a mistake, because each one of the judges that made this mistake made the mistake repeatedly and have caused irreparable and substantial harm to hundreds of innocent people for political reasons. short of a red-handed caught mass murderer, I can think of very few more clear justifications for the death penalty under the law. Hang the judges. Wrap them up, get them in a courtroom, prosecute them, and sentence them to the maximum available penalty under the law. Because that is what they did to these innocent people, causing great harm and death. These judges murdered protesters whose rights were explicitly violated by the initial arrest and then again by the nature of the convictions. That cannot be tolerated, right? And in that vein, I'll say this before I wrap it up. In the debate, they tried to get Donald Trump to say that he's going to win the White House and then seek retribution for everything that's been done to him. And he was very politic about it. He answered correctly, given the situation, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to trap him into saying that he's going to go out and do a bunch of Banana Republic prosecute. He's just going to go and pick every Democrat and charge them with something, right? He's just going to make up charges, or he's going to send out a bevy of friendly prosecutors to just make up illegitimate charges. And he said, my retribution will be success. I'm going to take office and I'm going to fix this country. I'm going to make America great again. We're going to have a great economy, yada, yada, yada. And that, given the politic of the situation, is in fact the correct answer. But here's what concerns me. Here's what I'm worried about. I'm a big Trump supporter, and I absolutely will be voting for him again, right? It will be my absolute privilege and pleasure to vote for Donald Trump for a third time. But here's a concern that I have. He didn't lock her up. Part of why we have the problems we have right now in our legal system is because Hillary Clinton was allowed to get away with everything she did. And now the email thing was the least of it. Let's not forget her selling off a substantial portion of the U.S. nuclear arsenal to foreign enemies. Hillary Clinton is a monster who is, and I mean, the extent of her treason and her crimes, let's not forget the scam that she and Bill ran in Haiti. Hillary Clinton should have been in prison. Bill and Hillary both should have been in prison since before Bill was elected. These are career criminals, significant career criminals. Murder and fraud being near the least of their crimes. And Trump did not lock her up. I am concerned that Trump's going to take office and there will not be, forget retribution, right? You look at Fani Willis, you look at Judge Merchan, you look at D.A. Bragg, and I could go on and on. You look at these corrupt prosecutors and judges, and hell, look at the mayors and governors who changed election laws illegally, unconstitutionally, without the involvement of the legislatures. Those are serious crimes for which there has been no accountability, no conviction, nothing. Those are serious crimes that have been left just unanswered. That is a concern that I have, that we'll elect the Donald and then we'll pretend like it's just business as usual, and these criminals will not be prosecuted for their crimes. They must be prosecuted for their crimes, right? Yes, part of this is I've just watched my guy get raked over the coals and just fucked up. and it aggravates me and it's infuriating. And there's a big part of me that just wants to see the bad guys that did the bad thing to my buddy torn across. I just want to see him drawn and quartered and ripped apart. I want to see him just destroyed. Yeah. There is that emotional gut response to the psychopathy that we've been seeing. But let me remind you, two things can be true at the same time. Right? Imagine you spend a summer with a body popping up every week, and we find the guy. Right? And this is in your community. Right? You've got kids. We find the guy. A mass murderer. Killed a kid every week. We've got irrefutable evidence that this is the guy. He did it. We know he did it. The court is going to prosecute him. Right? The police arrest him. The court will prosecute him. A jury will convict him. A judge will sentence him. God willing, he'll be sentenced to execution. And it is okay. It is okay for you to want to see the criminal prosecuted and punished under the law, and also to wish that you could just put your hands on him yourself. Right? My logical preference is that the court, that the law does what we expect the law to do, which is to arrest criminals like Fannie Willis and D.A. Bragg and Judge Merchan and prosecute them. In fact, as much as I'm not a fan of the RICO laws, I would love to see those people wrapped up under RICO. Because if we RICO those motherfuckers, we get to put Joe Biden in there with them and everybody in his administration. And if you're real honest with a RICO case, if you start with Fannie Willis, you're going to incarcerate every Democrat that's ever been elected. But it's okay. Logically, I want to see the law do what I expect the law to do, what I pay the law to do. But emotionally, and it's okay to have emotions. You're human beings. It's okay to have an emotional desire to want something at a deep emotional level. We had a bunch of kids in a little village called Sanjare in Afghanistan go missing. Kids showed up a week later without ears or noses, missing fingers, all little girls, because of the school we built, where we let the boys and girls all go to school. And we found the guys that cut up these baby girls. Right? Now, there's a logical expectation when you're encounter criminals. The law is going to do what the law does and take care of those criminals. There is an emotional desire to solve the problem yourself, but the police protect criminals from people like us, from people like me. Now, this one time in Sanjare, they were out of cops. It was an active war zone. And we were looking at monsters. There are no more monsters in Sanjare. It's okay to have the emotional desire to do harm to someone who deserves to have harm done to them. The logical preference is for the law to handle it. But if you are not capable of doing great violence, you are not a good person. You are a harmless person. Because you without the capacity to do great violence do not have the ability to turn violence against evil and be the sword and shield that defends the weak and the innocent. Now, it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. Being harmless doesn't make you bad. It makes you lukewarm. It makes you valueless. It makes you a zero-sum entity. So, okay, so that was somewhat slightly less than Mellow Monday. I've got it pulled up. I was going to try to cover more than one court case this morning, but I mean, this is a big deal. These obstruction charges being dropped. This is a big deal. So we'll do Chevron Deference tomorrow, and we'll see how I'm feeling tomorrow. Because hey, like I said, like I explained on Friday, this show is supposed to be from 7:30 to 8, but of course, it's my show. There's nobody coming on right after me. I can stop when I'm ready. And well, we've gone over and done almost an hour again. We'll see. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow we'll start with Chevron Deference, and then if we have time, or I'm just still feeling it, then we'll get into the other stack of cases that were resolved quite recently, because SCOTUS has actually done a lot of great stuff in the past 2 weeks. So thanks for watching this morning, guys. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow.